When I was working for the pharmaceutical industry, in my office, I had this sign that said, "I must be a mushroom. They keep me in the dark and feed me lots of bullshit. I hope I won't feed you with too much BS." My title here maybe made you wonder what I was going to talk about. My name is Edvin Johannesen. Most people call me Eddie. I'm a biologist and mycologist by training. I was trained in, should we say, traditional taxonomy at the University of Oslo. And for various reasons, I chose to pursue a professional career in biomedical research, biomedical imaging, rather than mycological research. So nevertheless, myxomycetes have been my primary interest since I wrote my thesis in Norway back in 1982 on Norwegian myxomycetes. And now as a retiree, I spend most of my time studying myxomycetes. Not the one. Citizen science is a relatively new concept, I'd say. There's actually an official EU definition. It's quite broad. Any activity, that's quite broad, that involves the public in scientific research and thus has the potential to bring together science, policymakers, and society as a whole in an impactful way. So bringing together public, science, impact. Anyway, well, Jolita, you used the term citizen science. Karina, you tended to avoid it. I think you don't like it too much because the term is not well defined. It's broad, so whatever is a citizen scientist. I won't answer the question. When I use the term citizen science or citizen scientist, I don't put people into boxes, so to speak. Traditionally, in Norway, the study of myxomycetes was initially a result of more or less random collection. The two guys on the top here, father and son, both professors in botany in Norway, they were traveling around Norway, collecting basically anything they could find, plants, fungi, even myxomycetes. These were professional botanists. The guy to the bottom left, Søren Christian Sommerfeld, he was a priest, as you can see. He actually described Fusarium vernum as new to science. When he went around Norway, when he was not preaching, he couldn't party, so he was getting bored. So most priests in Norway at the time, they became botanists on the side. So I guess maybe we could say that he was one of the first citizen scientists in Norway. So things changed a bit when the lady to the bottom right here, Astrid Carlsen, she was a pioneering woman in botany in Norway. She worked at the University of Bergen. She went to England by chance, I guess, on some sort of internship. And there she met Gulielma Lister. And Miss Lister taught her myxomycete systematics. And Astrid Carlsen came back to Norway, went through the collections in Oslo in the herbarium, and started collecting herself in Western Norway. And there's an extensive collection of hers at the Bergen Museum, but unfortunately, it has not yet been digitized. So her collection is not visible to anyone. You have to actually go there and look at it physically. And by the time, she published two papers, one in 1934 and one in 1943. And by 1943, the number of species known from Norway had reached about 100, as you can see here. Then not much really happened until I and another student a couple of years later in Bergen decided to study myxomycetes for some strange reason. And by the time we had written our thesis we both had finished by 1985, the number of species known for Norway had doubled to around 200. then I had a break for a few years because I had a job, and nothing really happened until around 2000, where a colleague of mine in the company I used to work for, a rather nerdy person, studying myxomycetes at the time was a nerdy thing to do. He was a chemist and a Buddhist. That tells everything, doesn't it? Long story, well, basically every Monday morning for a few years, he and his young son, went into the woods, collected myxomycete, brought it to me Monday morning. I brought them home, identified them for them, and these guys found a lot of new species during a few years until around 2010. And then my partner in crime currently, this is what a typical Norwegian citizen scientist looks like. I have his permission to use the photo, by the way. This is Mr. Per Vetlesen. He and I have been a good pair, complementing each other. He's a dedicated, true citizen scientist. And in 2020, we published this special issue of on myxomycetes from the Norwegian journal Agarica. I have a few extra copies for those who want the paper version, or otherwise it's available as a free PDF. And by the time we published this paper, the number had increased to 363. And that's only 3 years ago. As we speak, the number of species known from Norway is 405. And Norway is also a small country. So if you look at the numbers for Finland, Sweden, and Denmark, it's nowhere near. And why is that? Well, Denmark is not directly comparable geographically, biogeographically, but Finland and Sweden are comparable, I think, in many ways. Finland has had Maria Härkönen for decades. Sweden has had Uno Eliasson. He was actually my mentor when I was a student, so he's been around for a while. Finland has even had a book, like you wanted to read a book. The Finnish book in Finnish with photos and identification keys and descriptions, and even with Finnish vernacular names on all 230 species. It's still remaining at around 250. Why is that? There are many tools available to those who want to study myxomycetes, many of which have emerged recently. In Norway, we have this species map system called, well, it's called Artskart in Norwegian. This system collects information from all the different museum databases, from the public observation system, and a range of different database sources. And here you can search species and see where in Norway these have been reported and found. So it's a sort of a very, very useful tool for everyone to use. And this is the Norwegian equivalent to the Latvian system, where everyone can report their findings and upload photos. You have the specific coordinates and ecological details and who has identified it and so on and so forth. So currently we have more than 15,000 reports in this system. You have said 14,000 plus in Latvia, is that so? Was it? In Sweden, there are 14,000 plus, so not a great difference. And of course, iNaturalist have been mentioned. We don't use that much in Norway because we have our own system. And of course, the global systems like GBIF have been mentioned. LADO's nomenclature database is immensely important. I use these systems all the time. And Henrik Götzsche's database on literature reports from around the world is very useful as well. And we shouldn't forget about the Facebook. You have local ones in many countries, at least in some countries. You don't have that in Norway, but this is the biggest one. I think it's 50,000 plus members in this group currently. I'm frequently in there and trying to offer my assistance if I can. And also in Norway, we are I'm in the process of making these species on net pages. The first one launched earlier this year was on the genus Lamproderma with the descriptions and photos and the maps, distribution maps, and the synoptic key to the genus Lamproderma in Norway, covering currently 28 species, most of them being nidicolous. Of course, everyone is being exposed to beautiful photos and time-lapse videos and stories on YouTube. So, I mean, it's available to everyone. So why is there still this difference between Norway and Sweden and Finland, as an example? I think there are many important elements, but the three ones that I would like to mention is there needs to be a few dedicated collectors, call them citizen scientists if you want. They need assistance in identification of what they're finding, and they are encouraged by seeing that their efforts are becoming visible and making a difference. Okay, I'll go back. In Norway, most of the new species, a lot of people report species or findings, but the majority of the new species since around 2000 have been collected by a handful of people. I've been mostly too busy collecting myself because I spent time on the microscope looking at their specimens, but in the spring, in May and June, I always prioritize going to the snow patches to look for snowbank myxomycetes. And the enthusiasm and perseverance of these people have been further nourished by seeing that their efforts are resulting in increased knowledge about myxomycetes in Norway in publications like this one or at meetings, and trying to show people that what they are doing makes a difference. And this again further encouraged more people to search for myxomycetes, not only looking for them and photographing them, but I also asked people to collect specimens. So many of the Norwegian specimens collected in the past few years have been sent to guides like you, Dimitro, and you, Martin, recently, and I brought about 70 specimens or so to this meeting to be given to you people for studying your work. So these are not specimens that I collected. It's collected by people that I have urged to collect specimens. I think also I should mention vernacular names, because previously there were not so many. First, there were only the three mentioned ones, the vomit and shit and puke and whatever. And there have been, until recently, there were about 40 species. Now there are 215 Norwegian myxomycetes or myxomycetes in Norway with common vernacular names. And they were adopted recently. I happened to sit in the committee, so it was an easy task to get them approved. I try to be creative, like you mentioned, whoever mentioned, mind-stimulating names, and people are really thrilled by creative names. And when you tell them, oh, this is, and you use the Norman star drizzle or something like that, oh, wow. And they remember that name. If you give them, you call them Didymium melanospermum, oh, really? And they got it 2 minutes later, right? So I think this also stimulates the layperson's interest in myxomycetes. Finland has 230 common names. I don't know many you have in Latvia or other countries, but I think you shouldn't neglect the importance of having common names. I also have had the privilege of being in, not daily, but even perhaps almost weekly contact with the name editor for the Norwegian name database, both for vernacular and scientific names. We have an official name database, and it's important, given the volatile nature of myxomycetes systematics currently, to update this database, because things changes all the time. When I tell her there's a new species for Norway, or this species has switched to another genus, it's updated the day after. In Sweden, that has been much more challenging. When people are not able to report their findings because the name is not in the name database, or they don't find it because it has changed name and it's not updated in the database. People are getting discouraged. There are some obstacles ahead. The Oslo Fungarium, the curator staff has become quite challenging recently. That is a risk of specimens piling up in an endless backlog, not being easily accessible to the outside world, which is unfortunate. And neither Per Vetlesen nor I are getting any younger. And there's nobody in Norway recently that can take over for us in the role that we have now. Excuse me. So what are the key messages? Apart from bribing about having beaten Sweden, of course, which is always fun. Well, first of all, the citizen scientist community represents, I think it's obvious, and important, and in my opinion, still greatly underutilized or underexploited, if you want, in a positive sense, for the research scientists. Secondly, traditional taxonomists with extensive species knowledge and field experience are becoming rare, and this knowledge is increasingly in the hands of citizen scientists. Not sure if it should be, but that's the development in mycology, at least. Academia, including the public repositories, should seek to attract dedicated catalyst amateurs, whatever that is, that can bridge the gap between academia and citizen scientists. And finally, the successful exploitation of dedicated, I think this has been addressed already, dedicated amateurs, citizen scientists, will potentially provide access to specimens and associated collection data that may substantially improve taxonomic, phylogenetic, biogeographic, and ecological research on myxomycetes. I'm approaching the end. Just to mention a couple of reflections from two perspectives, one from the citizen science perspective, one from the research scientist perspective. This, I'd like to mention this nice paper. Excuse me. Sarah Lloyd in Tasmania is a perfect example of how an amateur, she likes to call herself amateur naturalist, can really make a difference. Due to her collaboration with professional myxomycetologists, it seems like Sarah's extensive collecting, assisted by people like you, Karina, and others, I guess, may give us new insight into myxomycete evolution and speciation in geographically isolated places like Tasmania, other places in Australia or New Zealand, other places. From a different angle, Hofstetter and co-workers also focus on the growing implication of citizen scientists. This paper deals primarily with macrofungi, but I think it is as relevant for the myxomycete science community. Final slide. Here are 4 passionate citizen scientists who joined me on a 4-day trip to the mountains in Norway in June this year. They turned around on short notice, and thanks to them, we were able to provide more than 300 samples for Martin's project, the biogeography project, studying nidicolous myxomycete species in mountain regions of Europe. Hopefully you'll get some nice, exciting surprises from this material. You just received it. And this particular, sorry? Okay, good. This spot doesn't, for those of you who are collecting nidicolous snowbank myxomycetes, this is not the typical spot, is it? Well, this is where we ended up, because after 2 days in the areas with nice snow patches, we didn't find anything. So we almost gave up. And then we went down to this subalpine birch forest, and there were dark-spored species everywhere. This is where we collected more than 250 specimens in this spot. So this is majority of what you received this time, and you received some previous ones. So I guess we can just conclude the slime molds work in mysterious ways. Thanks for listening. And please, I don't want to carry these copies back home, so whoever.
I can do without a microscope. Without a microscope. Many thanks for this wonderful talk, which has already summarized in my eyes a lot of discussion we will have. I think, and therefore, citizen science is a good name, but I don't like the name amateurs for it, but we have in German, you know, amateur Wissenschaftler, since we are all professionals now. We are all professionals. I think we are all citizens. Oh. I think the only thing which tells us apart is some of us work at the institution and some of us do not. And I'm super grateful to all of these contributions, since we have so many species with such a low breeding propensity. I stress this word again, that I myself find it once a lifetime. I think I myself have seen about 100 species of myxomycetes at least only once in my lifetime. Okay? This is, I think, only this single fact illustrates how important it is, and the only thing we can do is to exchange specimens, exchange information via the internet as good as we can. So we should be grateful for these tools being around for many thanks.
Welcome. Just a comment to your comment on the term amateur. I think we should remind ourselves and try to change the perception of the word, who stems from Latin amatore, which means love. So it's a love for things. That's what amateur means. It's not something that's not really professional. Yeah. It's a lover of things. Yeah.
Something is not professional.
Yeah.
You always have to fight against this.
I just wanted to comment about also Latvian names, like a team of 4 people, including Julit and Sandis. Also made Latvian names for our slime molds. We have 230 taxa, and for all their Latvian names, and it really facilitates people to see them more, like because of the attractiveness, as I really like it.
So how many species have common names?
All of them.
All of the 230?
Yeah.
See, so. Finland 230, Latvia 230, Norway only 215. Yeah, Anna. Who?
If Josef Rostafiński was here,
that's a while ago, yeah.
He would agree with you vernacular names, because he was probably the first who created vernacular Polish names.
Yeah.
So
okay. I just told Henrik Götzke in Denmark that we have approved these 200 or 175 new Norwegian names, and he was like, I don't think that's not important. I don't like vernacular names. So there are different opinions, but when I talk to people, citizen scientists, amateurs, whatever, they love it. Especially, and I recently had a comment, oh, these slime mold names, this is what fungus names should be like. So be creative about mind-stimulating names, not just the boring, like yellow, brown, stike, be creative. That's my message. Okay.